So the goal of today, I'm Patricia Da Silva, president now of Ecogold, saddle pad company, and I'm actually the one that answers the phone if you call the 1-800 number. So I get a lot of people, I get two kinds of clients. One is the people who already know what they were going to buy, but then I get a lot of questions. And so I wanted to bring in a panel of experts because it's really a joint effort. Your horse's back, it is not just, it doesn't only get fixed with a saddle pad, but I thought it was interesting to bring in different experts. So maybe you can introduce yourselves. Go ahead, Michelle, maybe introduce yourself since you're in
Sure. All right, I am Michelle Skawronski. So I am an equine massage therapist. I've been doing it now for about 2 years. And I am a Canadian, but I live down here in Texas for the past, well, I guess it'll be 8 years in March. Dual citizen now. We just got our citizenship here as well this year. So yeah, so I love the equine massage. I became involved with the Ecogold pads about just over a year ago. I had actually just changed pads on a horse of mine and her back got sore. So I went searching and ended up with Ecogold and was really impressed with the product. So that's kind of the story just goes from there. So it's been a lot of fun. I've enjoyed it a lot.
Okay, Lauren.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Davang. Graduated from Texas A&M's College of Veterinary Medicine in 2017. Do a bit of general practice, lameness, reproduction, medicine, that sort of thing. Most experience with the Western performance horse, namely timed event horses, but do see the occasional English horse. In my spare time, I compete in barrel racing myself, and we raise quarter horses. My mom and sister and I do. Have a couple dogs, have a couple cats, have a husband. Other than that, been involved with horses for over 20 years and been practicing medicine for 3, coming on 4.
Okay, Krista.
Hi, I'm Krista. I work with Butte Saddles. I've been with Butte Saddles for about 11 years. I do the Midwest territory, and I also do Florida. I do mostly the hunter jumper fittings, a little bit of dressage, but focus more towards the hunter jumper clientele. I have a daughter who does the short stirrup. I rode all through my junior years, and now I do saddle fittings, and I'm a sales rep as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so first we're gonna kick off with Lauren. Signs of a sore back, because you probably get lots of those.
Yes. So back pain can be a little tricky to interpret. A lot of times what you'll see is a decrease in performance or reduced performance. You have to be careful when palpating the back. I have a lot of people who say, well, my horse doesn't like to be groomed over the back, or my horse doesn't like the water hose to hit my back. And those things could maybe be back pain and maybe be something else, like just skin sensitivity, or the brush is too, rough for them. So the other thing is you have to be careful when palpating the back with your fingers. It's best to use the flats of your fingers and not the nails, because I also have a lot of people that come in that think the horse has a sore back and they're digging their acrylic fingernails into their back while they push and say, look what happens. And a lot of times, you could be, falsely creating back pain. But as far as actual back pain, decreased performance, a sudden change in behavior, that might be when you're saddling, if they suddenly become cinchy. Some horses are sensitive to tightening the girth or the cinch no matter what. But if they suddenly change their behavior and are now more sensitive to that, that could be a sign. Lots of people complain about the horse just doesn't want to move forward, doesn't want to drive with the hind end, doesn't want to engage themselves. They might be able to appreciate stiffness of the back. They might see muscle spasms. And then the other thing they might complain about is, they might be one-sided, the horse is stiff to the left or stiff to the right, or it might be a movement that they're trying to do that, suddenly is not the same when you do it one direction versus the other. The other sign of back pain They can even have incoordination and stumbling, which could be, confused or caused by other things. But that's just kind of a brief on the signs of back pain. And there's always other, every horse is different, but that's kind of just the biggest. And a lot of times for mild back pain, all you'll see is a decrease in performance. You won't actually appreciate, a physical pain.
Because there's some horses that are very stoic, right? So it's a little more difficult. So the subtle signs. Michelle, how about you? What are the common problems that you see?
I'll have people call me to come out and look at their horse, or I'll work on horses that I do on a regular basis. So those ones are always the best because I can feel right away if something has changed in their back. So for me, it's a lot about feel, going down the top line, over the withers, through the back. If they're soft and they don't react and, everything's great. But a lot of times as I come through the withers and along, the back will tighten up and get anything from just a slight little stiffness to like muscle spasms where they dip, to try and get away from that soreness. So it can be, mild to quite severe. Like Lauren was saying, I make sure I use the pads on my fingers because a lot of people will press down and you can make any horse look sore if you do that. So I use the pads on my fingers and just touching so many horses, I kind of get a good feel what feels normal and not. Performance issues, I'll have, they're swapping out their leads, they're not going, something's changed basically. So performance wise, one-sided, all of that stuff. Saddling, getting on, they're uncomfortable, they're dipping their back. So, changes like that are all signs of a sore back.
And are there different differences between disciplines, or are there things you see more on dressage horses versus Western, or?
No, no, I do work on both English and Western horses. And there's nothing that jumps out at me more. Some of the jumpers maybe might have a little more, some like lower back lumbar involvement. I probably find that a little bit more, but with jumping, they're loading their hind end and using those back muscles so much. But no, I think, pretty across the board, Western English, it's pretty similar. So definitely just, a change in behavior and a change in performance are two of the big ones.
And Krista, what's the best way to determine if the horse's back is changing, especially when you go fit saddles?
When I first get out there, I always talk to the client and see how old the horse is, what they're doing with it. Are they going to compete with this horse, or are they just trail riding, to see if it's going to gain some muscle or not gain some muscle. So it really just depends on where you are and what you're doing with getting fitted for the saddle, because horses obviously do change, and that impacts if you want to do a wool flock saddle or a foam saddle. So it really just depends on what you're planning on doing with your horse, because it will change. Horses change every 6 months in their back, depending on how much and how hard you're working them as well.
And other than feel, what are some signs that your saddle doesn't fit or saddle pad doesn't fit?
Some signs are, you see the saddle when someone picks up the trot. If you see their saddle rising in the back when they're trotting and posting, obviously you can tell the saddle's a little tight in the front and isn't fitting. You can also tell with some horses, you will put one saddle on them and they'll pick up the trot or the canter, and they're just not as free moving in their shoulders. Some of the horses will tell you, hey, this just doesn't fit right. You just want to make sure you have no bridging under your saddle. You want to be able to run your hand flat underneath the saddle and make sure you have no bridging gaps as well. And same with saddle pads. Some people like to over pad them, and sometimes when you're over padding them, you're just screwing up the fit of your saddle.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Mm-hmm. People tend to want to put too much stuff.
Layers.
And so that it's comfortable. And it's basically, like a pad is like a sock, right? So if you put like 5 pairs of sock in your shoe, you're not going to be comfortable.
No.
It needs to be the right balance, and you can't overdo it.
Correct.
So you're not going to make the horse better just by overstuffing. You have to have the right fit. And what are some particular issues with younger horses, with growing horses, Lauren?
I mean, I don't see a ton of things with like the young versus the old horse. I think you could more compare the, athletic horse that's used for something to a horse that's not ridden, or the level of activity they're doing. But young horses in particular, I mean, depending on which discipline and what age you're starting them under saddle, a young horse might be the first time that they're asking to bear weight, or have carry weight and have the saddle. So there might be some changes there. This is all newer to them than an old horse. The other thing about young horses and older horses typically will have changes in their back due to time and age. It's just the nature of being a used horse that's riding. Their back is going to change. So you might have to, like they mentioned earlier about fitting every 6 months. I don't know about in the Western world, because we don't have our saddles you can't change them as much as you can with English saddle, but it is true that older horses' backs change over time, and there's going to be adjustments that need to be made. Your saddle may no longer fit, when your horse was 3 versus when your horse is 8. An older horse has also had more time for things to wear and tear, or a younger horse, you might be dealing with a congenital issue, or maybe they had a traumatic injury, but typically you think of a young horse, you think of a nice, unused back that hasn't had a lot of time for things to go wrong.
Michelle, do you want to go over a little bit saddle pad fit or saddle fit on the Western side? We can't hear you. You're muted. Unmute.
Sorry, I was muting. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, what you guys were talking about with the pads as well. I do see in the Western side more people stacking pads, trying to kind of, I guess, fill in the gaps. English saddle fit, and you're familiar with this, Krista. I feel like it's a little, I don't know if easier is the right word,
Yeah.
but you have some more options, and you can really see, like you were saying, when it's tight in the front, you can really see that back popping up. And Western saddles don't really show you as much,
No.
I guess because there's a bigger area. But a lot of people do stack pads. So when I'm trying, what I tell people is that finding the right pad that is contoured, fits your horse's back, works with the saddle, that you can shim when your horse changes is really important, because you don't want, if you have a saddle that fits your horse well, and your horse is going to change, but if you start with a well-fitted saddle, you don't want to have stacked pads, because it just creates friction and movement and increases the chances of slipping. And that pertains to English saddles as well. I think one of the important things about the Ecogold pads is how they're shaped, to fit up over the withers, sit off of the horse's withers, is really important. And then just sort of have that close contact with the back so that your saddle fits like it's supposed to, if that makes sense.
Yeah, Krista, can you show, we had a lot of questions about shimming, and maybe we'll go back to the Western pads, but I don't know if what the mix is with the participants today, but can you show normally how you would, let's say people have a specific saddle, they bought a new horse and they kind of need to make it fit, that they can't buy a new saddle.
Yeah.
Then what?
Okay, so with the Ecogold pads, they have a great shimming. You can do front shimming, you can do hind shimming, you can do both. The nice thing about the shimming is there's two different sizes. There's a 1/2 inch or 3/4 inch. So you can shim where is needed. So if you have a horse that is low and you need to fill the gap in the shoulder area, or say he's uneven, you can put a shim. Sorry, I don't know if you guys can see. You can put the shim in and shim the front. Sometimes you can only need to, if your horse is undeveloped and has more muscle on the right side versus the left side, sometimes you might just need to shim one side versus the other. You really just have to feel and see where you're at. You don't want to over shim though, because you're over shimming, you're losing the purpose of your saddle fitting correctly. So when you put the shims in, sorry, I'm trying to demo this. You want to make sure they're even and flat as well. When you put them in, you don't want any bubbles or gapping because it's just going to sit funny under the horses as well. Sorry, not very good at just demoing. So you want to put the shims in. You can do the front or the hind, and make sure you pull them up and they get into the saddle pad where they need to be and that they're laying flat, like I just said. You can, if you need a rise in the back, some people need a rise in the back, that their horse, it's tilting backwards, the saddle. You want your saddle always to sit even. So sometimes you need to shim just in the back, just so you can get an even feel. Your saddle should always sit completely even from the pommel in the front to the pommel in the back. So either way, vice versa, if it's laying front or backwards, you are able to shim either way and go from there.
So would they like shim it and then ride and go?
So
with the feel?
what I do is I put the saddle on the horse with no saddle pad, run my fingers through, see where I'm having gapping or issues. Sometimes it's even just the rider leaning to the left or to the right too much. And that sometimes causes your saddle just to be unbalanced. So sometimes you need to shim just for that as well. But I fit the saddle on the horse bareback, and then I put the pad on. I don't recommend using a lot of pads. I recommend a thinner pad, then the half pad, and feel then where you feel you may need it. Sometimes you'll ride and say, hey, that felt great, or maybe I just need a little bit more here. It's kind of a balancing game just to see where you think you need it to be.
Yeah, it's a good point. The rider being, we always favor one side. Maybe Lauren, what are some of the, do you see that where it's like the rider's fault? Not the fault, but
yeah, it's a fine line to cross. But I mean, a lot of back pain can be caused due to either the equipment doesn't fit, or maybe it's a touchy subject, but the rider's ability or what the rider's doing, if the rider's unconsciously using one side or the other, or if they have poor balance or poor core strength, or if they just don't know how to ask the horse to engage their core muscles in their hindquarters. If the horse is constantly ridden, not collected with the head up and the back hollowed, they're going to develop back pain even if their equipment does fit. So it is kind of, that's as much as any of the medical things you could do, is work on the rider's ability and the rider's education on understanding how to get a horse to be collected and framed and train those muscles, because back pain is just as much bone and joint as it is soft tissue, muscle, ligament, tendon. And those muscles that stabilize the back, especially like the multifidus muscle and the other apaxial muscles, those muscles, if they're not used appropriately, if they're untrained muscles, they're not strong enough to stabilize the back when you're riding. If they have atrophy due to injury, that's another thing. But, you could always work on building those muscles and riding balanced, and that will help with your back a lot. So yeah, there's a huge component to riding and exercise and fitness that helps your horse's back health.
And Michelle, how often should people get body work done on their horse?
I always recommend, every 4 to 6 weeks. If someone comes to me with a problem where their horse's back is quite sore or something else on their horse, we might do a follow-up in a couple of weeks. But generally, every 4 to 6 weeks, it's really good for me to be able to feel any changes in their horses right away. And it seems to just be kind of that perfect little happy spot of keeping their muscles nice and soft and no muscle knots forming.
And there's so many therapies. What specifically does equine massage do versus other types of therapies?
So equine massage is the type that I do. The therapeutic type massage is basically when you go into your massage therapist and they ask you if you want a relaxation or if you want like a deep tissue. So I'm doing a deep tissue. So I'm using my hands to feel along the muscle, feel for any knots, stiffness, watch for any reaction. And then I stay in that muscle area. We use different strokes to loosen the muscle, direct pressure to help break up any muscle knots or fibers, and then what we call closing the muscle after I'm done. So that's basically how the type that I do works. So yeah.
The type that you feel like you've done a workout after.
Yeah, where you're kind of like, oh, that really hurts, but it hurts really good. That's the type I do.
We have a question from the public for Krista. What are the signs that the saddle is too long for the horse?
The saddle should really sit between the T8 and the T18 vertebrae. Otherwise, if I'm not mistaken, you're sitting on their kidneys. So you just want to make sure your saddle fits in their back between the 8 and the 18. If it's too far back, you're on their kidneys, and obviously you are affecting them and bothering them. It's hard to tell when you see that. You just have to go off the bat, looking off your horse. Obviously, if you have a 15-hand horse with a short back, an 18-inch saddle will probably be very big on it. And it just depends on how your horse is built and what kind of saddle you have.
Okay. And guys, if you have other questions, like please use the chat or use the Q&A because we'll have time and answer them. So what are some best practices to maintain a healthy back, Lauren?
Yeah, so there's several things you can do. The first of all is nutrition. A horse that's adequately fed will have good fat cover. They should have a good natural top line. So I always address that. A horse that doesn't look well, they seem to lose their top line first. So that is a deal. There's also lots of stretching that you can do. A quick Google search of carrot stretches. I found a couple of really good articles. One, I printed them out. One of them was from thehorse.com. It was a top 5 stretches for healthy horses, and it had pictures and how-tos and how often on your carrot stretches. So it's like right here. I don't know, it's kind of mirrored. But anyway, that was good. There was also another article that was made by the University of Tennessee's College of Veterinary Medicine. They had a really good article on carrot stretches as well. Those stretches will help maintain your horse's core and help with elasticity of their back and flexibility. And I think that's a big deal. Also maintaining a healthy back would be to, ride with being aware of the horse's collection, asking for impulsion of the hind end. That also means you should probably, take into account any hind limb lameness or other lamenesses that might affect your horse's movement, because back pain can be both primary and secondary. Other things to maintain a healthy back, you could do, there's like the Pessoa system and other systems that you can do for lunging and in hand work. They require a little bit of teaching and training, but those are also really good. But anyway, those are kind of like my go-to for maintaining a healthy back.
Someone asked a question on kissing spine, and actually that's one of the questions. It seems to be increasingly common. Can you explain what it is and what contributes to the cause of it?
Yeah, so kissing spines is also known as impingement of the dorsal spinous processes of the back. So the back has these, the spine has these spinous processes that are like this. You could imagine them to be like a fence post or whatever, and they should be spaced apart. And kissing spine is when they either touch or they overlap, and that touching and overlapping can cause pain. You can also see evidence of new bone formation or bridging between the dorsal spinous processes. It can be a little tricky because kissing spine can be an asymptomatic finding. I think up to like 39% of horses will have kissing spine changes on their back x-rays that don't show any pain. Also the horse's pain tolerance level. One horse may have a really bad looking back on x-rays and may be okay. Another horse might have one or two close spaces and they're pretty, painful. As far as the cause of kissing spine, it's still largely unknown. If you start looking at survey films of yearlings, you'll find kissing spine in yearlings. So is there a congenital component? There might be. There's also acquired, over time use, the horse's back changes and ill-fitting equipment, that whole deal. So there's several different causes of what may end up having kissing spine. And there's several ways to treat it depending on how severe. A lot of times the main thing is controlling pain and isolating that to see if that's actually your primary problem or not. So if you and your veterinarian are confident that kissing spine is the actual cause of the behavior change and the issues that you're having, you could either do things like shockwave therapy. You could do injections of corticosteroids and other products. In severe cases, you can even do surgery where they cut the ligament in between the dorsal spinous processes and have them kind of open back up. And there's another popular surgery that's done. Dr. Soundness was the one who really piloted the surgeries where they actually go and trim down the dorsal spinous processes to create more space. So there's a lot of things that you can do. And again, the rehabilitation, the core exercises, the stretching, all of that helps to maintain your back. And even if you have to do surgery on that, you can't expect your horse just to sit in a stall for the 3 months or however long the recovery is and just get back on. There's definitely going to be in-hand rehabilitation that goes with it and constant exercises and stretching to maintain that healthy back.
Mm-hmm. And there were some questions on saddle pads that I'll just go through a little bit what the Ecogold engineering does, how you can figure out what a saddle pad's supposed to do. So I have a half pad here that's but basically I took it because it's a small item. And but the regular pads are the same way. So what you want to look at when you choose a half pad, what we have at Ecogold is 4 things. One is breathability, and so the purpose of a saddle pad, not just a half pad, but a regular pad, is to really wick the moisture. Your horses sweat a lot depending on the horse, but you really want to keep them as dry as possible. And I think some issues are just overheating. So I don't know if you can see here this material. So it's built in a honeycomb structure. So what it does, there's less fabric on the horse's skin. So this actually wicks out the moisture more. So that's the first thing. 2 is the non-slip. So this is a half pad. It has the non-slip on both ends. So when you pick a pad, you don't want something that slips all over the place. So you have non-slip, and this is hypoallergenic and breathable. As you see, there's all little holes. So that's the other thing. Then the third is impact protection. You can see what's in it. So this is high resiliency. It's a really good Velcro. This is 3/4 of an inch, but regular pads are 1/2 inch. But you could see here how it squishes and then it gets back up. So you want something that really is good for impact protection and that goes back up quickly. And then 4th is the wither relief. So all our pads have this wither relief. So it's those 4 things that you should look at, is not just like how thick it is, but like the 4 different aspects. If there's any questions, can you talk about treatment therapies that are not surgical?
Sure.
Like shockwave.
Yeah. So things that you can do that are not surgical, your veterinarian can do injections, either ultrasound guided or x-ray guided injections around the dorsal spinous process with steroids and other anti-inflammatories to try and take out the pain. You can also try shockwave therapy. It's a little expensive. It's typically 3 series of shockwave therapy to the back to get it done a few weeks apart each time. There's mesotherapy, which is a bunch of small needles that are injected to a kind of a broad space. Other things that you can do would be the rehabilitation and the kind of physiotherapy, the different stretches and exercises you can do to try and strengthen the back to help with the stability of the back. And then you and your vet can work together to see, if it's working, how long does it last, and how much improvement do you get? And if you've tried all those things and you're still at the point where your horse's back pain is unmanageable, then you can consider doing the surgery. But I like to try and do things without surgery first, and use surgery as the last, not like a last resort, but as I tried everything else and now I'm going to try the surgery.
Krista, saddles that slip, like other than being annoying, what could happen to the horse?
This comes back to it could be two of things. It can be a horse that's undeveloped in different areas, or you've over padded. Also comes back to a lot of it sometimes, like we've just talked about before, is people leaning. If you like to lean your right stirrup and you're wondering why your saddle pad on the right is always coming out, that is something that happens. I find that people's saddle pads that slip more are people that like to tend to over pad. So they're sitting on top of their horse instead of having more of a close contact feel. I personally, the less padding, the better. Better to have that close contact feel, and then you won't have as much slippage. But that's the great thing about like the Ecogold pads. They have an anti-slip on the top to help that protection as well, to help you stop sliding as well. But there's a variety of different reasons of why it can be slipping.
Mm-hmm. Michelle, suggestions for keeping the horse's back healthy over many miles for distance riders?
So number one, obviously your saddle is going to play a huge part of that when you're doing an endurance ride, and then finding the best pad that has the most support, breathability, is going to wick the sweat away and keep your horses as comfortable under that saddle as possible. I think it's important to mention to make sure that you wash your pads. Because when you don't, and they get heavy and crusted with sweat, especially in Texas, you can create ridges can create, this is any pad, when they get all hard like that, and it can create like hot spots. So being able to wash your pad and keep it soft is going to keep your horse so much more comfortable, especially when you're going many miles with them.
Good hygiene is important.
Good hygiene is important. Fungus is no good.
And what can people do on their own, like in between massage appointments?
If I could get everybody to stretch, I think that would be a really good thing. I always suggest to my clients that they stretch warm muscles. So either after you've ridden or before is fine, as long as you just give them a little brisk hand walk. Just like us stretching, you never want to stretch your cold muscles. So I really like stretching, cookie stretches, carrot stretches. You can look them up on Google, have them come around to each side, down between their legs. It'll really stretch out their top line and just keeps that suppleness for them. You can do, strong abs are going to support a horse's back. So I really like the ab lifts where you can use your fingers or a like blunt tool. Sometimes I'll use like the little scrubby end of a hoof pick, and you go under their belly along their midline and just kind of ask them to contract their abs and raise their back. And you can build up strength with that, 3 to 5 times. That's really good for them. And then Dr. Davang might have a better way of explaining it, but I call it the butt roll up. And it's just the creases along the
I think that's
the
what they
butt,
call it.
and I just scooch my fingers up along those creases, and I think it's like a reflex.
Yeah, they call it the butt tuck on the
butt tuck,
official
yeah.
carrot stretches stuff.
And they'll engage their abs, and they roll, and it really stretches out their top line as well. So
Lumbosacral lift.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
There's the proper term.
Yeah,
But
there it is.
those are all really good for just keeping, getting stronger abs and then keeping them stretched. So, and if you stretch regularly, your horse will learn them so quickly. You get out that cookie, and my mare starts to stretch before I'm even ready, because she likes food. But they get used to it really quick, and the more mobility you can get, the better off they are.
Someone's asking about pads, but maybe Krista, you can take this one. When it's for dressage, but when putting them under the saddle, do you advise having them flat and tighter to the back, or lifting them up into the gullet?
I lift them up into the gullet because sometimes they just get a little bit of crinkle, and depending on the pad, you want to lift it, put your saddle on, lift it up into the gullet so it sits up into your saddle instead of just flat on their back.
Yeah, that's what I would do too.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what else? Oh my gosh, that's a lot. With belly lifts, is there a more beneficial to hold the rounded back or relax and contract? I think you already answered, Michelle.
Yeah, so you're just asking them to, engage their abs and come up, and then you can ask them to hold that for a few seconds, building up strength as you go along. I've always been told that the more the horse can lift, that's the stronger their abs are. And yeah, they're really beneficial for both the back and the abs.
Lauren, how about blankets, that like massage blankets, magnetic blankets?
Mm-hmm.
Is that like, is there any science, or do you see, does it help at all, or?
As far as like published data and peer-reviewed studies, I think it's lacking for the magnetic blankets and the ceramic blankets. I do think that anything that keeps the muscles warm will help. So I can, like the back on tracks, I can see how that works. Warm, like Michelle said, you don't want to do things to cold muscles. So something that's going to keep your muscles nice and warm, I'm all about it. Magnetic blankets, I really don't know a ton about it. I don't think there's a lot of actual research behind it, but there's plenty of people who testimonially swear by those things. I think some of those blankets, they have the magnets put over acupressure points. And so I think the theory behind that is that increases blood flow to those areas and helps. But I don't know for sure how much they benefit on like a scientific scale.
Okay. Someone's asking, I think I'll take this one. If your saddle fits well and you don't need a lot of padding or shimming for impact, what is a good suggestion for a saddle pad? As I showed you on this, is a 3/4 inch, so it squishes down, and this is 1/2 inch. So the idea is to have a shimmable pad or something that you can basically adapt as like a sandwich. So this is 1/2 inch. If you need less, like we can get less. So if you're concerned with the fit, if 1/2 inch is too much, then what you do is you get a pad that you can shim, because also your horse is changing. So you might need less at some point and more at another point. So if it's a pad that you can shim, then you can pretty much put any padding or no padding. Mm-hmm. Then Cassie, hi Cassie. If you want to fit your saddle, do you fit your saddle with the half pad? Like, do you bring in the whole, Krista? Do you bring in the whole?
I fit it without the half pad, and see where what you need, and if there's bridging or if it's tight in the front or lifting in the back. And then I fit it with a half pad. And then I have everyone ride with their normal pads to see where they are. Because sometimes you may use a pad that's too thick, and it makes the saddle rise. And if you put a thinner half pad in, your saddle fits good and close contact to the horse.
And what happens if someone asked before, if there's no saddle fitter near you?
So the best thing to do if there's no saddle fitter is just start with a clean slate, put the saddle on your horse's back. Don't put it too far up on his withers and his shoulders. Make sure it's even, like I said, it's right behind their shoulders. Some people like to put their saddle so far forward at the beginning because they think it's going to slide back as they start riding. So start with a clean slate, put your saddle on, run your hands underneath, see if you have bridging. If you feel that you have bridging in the middle, then you need to fill that gap with a shimmable pad. If you feel like you have nothing or you're completely smooth, I start riding. I tell some people to have their friend video them, watch your saddle, see if it's lifting in the back, because sometimes it may be lifting in the back and you have no idea. So you can always, the great thing is the reps always, you can send them videos, they'll look at the videos of your saddle brands and they'll help you out and work with you.
Yeah, someone asked whether you need half an inch shims or 3/4, and you answered always start with less, and that's what I recommend too. I always, when people call me and they go, should I take this or this, I always go, well, go without, or should I buy a pad and a half pad? Just get the pad, and then
start with
so
less.
go less.
Yeah,
and
go
you
less.
can always add.
You can always add on.
You don't get the biggest.
Don't go wild.
Don't go wild. Go conservative. We like that.
Yeah.
Okay. For the kissing spine, do you, Lauren, do you find it's more prevalent in horses of a certain discipline?
So I talked to a few colleagues of mine who see more of a variety of disciplines of horses. I do think that it affects English, just in a broad scope, the English disciplines more, because you think about the size of the saddle and the weight distribution of an English saddle versus a Western saddle. So I think it probably affects them more. I do know it's a pretty hot topic in barrel horses. It's a lot of barrel racers are aware of it, so they're looking for it. I do think that the size of the tree of barrel saddles and the weight distribution helps a lot of that. So, you know, on one hand, if a Western horse is having back pain, it's probably significant if it's still sensitive, even with all that weight distribution. But I do think it's just part of having a horse that is used for a discipline or sport and being ridden under saddle. I think any intense athlete, whatever discipline it may be, is going to be at risk for injuries and stress. And of course, you know, things like trauma, falls, those sorts of things don't really discriminate between Western or English or jumpers or that sort of thing. Although the jumping horse is typically, I think, eventers and jumpers and that sort of thing, the nature of their sport probably, you know, is a little bit more risky. They're actually jumping over obstacles. Some of those obstacles don't move. Whereas, you know, dressage horses, it's not a speed event, but there's definitely a lot of athletic components to dressage. It's just at, you know, collected slow paces. And I think that can be equally as hard on the back because of what they ask the horses to do to be in such a nice frame. So I think that it's probably, you know, a lot of the disciplines are affected. I just think that the you know, level of athleticism of the horse is going to play a role too. So, I mean, you could look at it either way, but I can see it affecting multiple disciplines and especially the horses that are really asked to exert themselves.
And on that, Krista, what are some of the things that you see? Because when a horse is injured in a leg, for example, they'll be on stall rest. Like with a sore back, is they're sometimes they just keep going. It's less, you know, you could have a sore back but still be showing. So what are some things that people should be more aware of?
I think people should be more aware when your horse's back is sore, get it checked out, have the chiropractor, have the vet look at it. Some people automatically just are like, oh, it's a saddle. It's not always just the saddle. There's like little things lead up to different things that happen. I just recommend people are always aware that, think about it. If your horse travels, sometimes you could be competing and training hard, and you may travel 10 hours. Your horse may lose weight and change a little bit, or if you have a nervous horse, they're always changing. So just be aware of your saddle, because 1 month it could be great and the next month it could have a little bit of a difference. So just always be checking your saddle and the fit of it.
And how often, like ideally in a perfect world, how often should you get it checked out?
Every 6 months, every year, depending how much you ride. I mean, the other thing is some people have 4 or 5 horses and they ride in the same 2 saddles. So they're on different shaped horses, and obviously some of the saddles stretch if you're on a little bit wider horses. I feel like the hunter jumper people use the same saddles. Each horse doesn't have their own saddle versus the dressage people, where most of them, and eventing, each horse has their own saddle. So just be aware, keep checking it.
And maybe it not overshow as well, or
and don't, because there's people that show way too much.
or over jump the horse. Michelle, on the Western side, what are some things, if you don't fit the saddle, what are some things that people should be doing on a 6-month basis, or should they be reevaluating their horse's back? Or
so you want to start your Western saddle fit. You want to start, much like Krista was saying, with a saddle that you can has room to allow the shoulder movement, the right shape for the horse's back. If you have a smaller, shorter backed horse, you don't want anything with a big square skirt that's going to dig into their hips. So just kind of starting with that that proper fit, and then monitoring as you go along. Quarter horses or other horses that are, built a little bit downhill, you got to think, your saddle fitting really nice and level on their back. So you can use shims to shim up the front a little bit, just to make your saddle fit level. So come across that quite often. Western saddle fit, a lot of people have, they don't have a saddle for every horse that they have, so it's fitting that saddle to the best of your ability to that horse, and then using a good choice of pad, and then using the shims to make those adjustments. So you never want to have a gullet that's so wide that it's sitting down on the top of the horse's withers, but you don't want to have one that's so small that it's pinching. I feel like you can make a little bit of more adjustments if you have a saddle that, I don't want to say on the big side, but allows some room for shimming. And I always say less is more as well. So don't shim if you don't need to. But if you do need to fill in a gap, you can shim. But if your saddle's too tight and it's pinching the withers, you've got a problem. You need to look at a different saddle, because there's not a lot that is gonna fix that. And I don't know, Krista, how much you guys go off of sweat marks. I was kind of curious with the English saddles. I've rode both, but some people think the sweat pattern is a big deal. Some people don't. I do look for dry spots if they're, if they're large. And then we'll shim, if they're dropping back behind the withers, we'll shim in that area, stuff like that. But I was kind of curious what you thought as a saddle fitter about that.
Some people are really into it. Like I said, I work with a lot of people who ride a bunch of different variety of horses. So they more are into just changing the half pad needed for the different kind of horse. Because a lot of these professionals, they'll just get on a horse that they haven't ridden before, a lot of the pro rides, and they just put their saddle on. So some people are very interested in where it makes sure see the sweat patterns are even on their shoulder and their back. And then I have some clients that they're comfortable, the saddle fits, but it needs to be adjusted a little bit with a half pad, and they're both happy, and the horse is happy and they're happy. Yeah. So it's really just a preference, I feel like.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And some of the best practices, maybe Michelle, for a healthy back in general.
In general, much like Dr. Davang was saying, good nutrition, not being a weekend warrior, so fitness for your horse to make sure that everything is, that they're fit and they're keeping that back healthy with strong abs. Body work, farrier work, good feet. It all starts at the feet. Having a good relationship with your vet. And also, I think it was Krista that made the point too, it's not always, you always want to start, I always have you got to start with good equipment. So you want to have good equipment. So we're thinking that everything else is good with the horse. So starting with a good pad and saddle, but also if your horse is sore and it's, and you go see your vet, a lot of times the number one cause of back pain actually comes, and Dr. Davang can expand on this, but actually comes from their legs. So they could have sore hocks. A lot of times if it's chronic, I'm finding like a lot of muscle tightness in their lumbar area or in their SI area. and it's, you know, I've massaged that horse, the next month I go, it's the same thing, I will suggest that they talk to their vet and go get a lameness workup if it, you know, something that's not improving. And, you know, in cases these horses end up needing attention paid to their hocks or their stifles.
Yeah. Can you touch on that? How does the feet affect the back?
Yeah, so there's kind of two theories on looking at back pain. One of them is a process of exclusion, of ruling out all the other possibilities of lameness or behavior changes in the horse. And then the other theory is to look at the back, you know, the whole horse approach. But definitely if there are lameness issues, and the feet are by far the most common area of the horse that's going to have a problem. People love to say that it's the shoulder or the stifle or the hip, and 9 times out of 10, it's going to be somewhere from the pastern down of the foot. But anyway, just looking at that, the horse is going to carry itself differently because it can't track normally or bear weight evenly, or maybe it's a stride issue and they can't extend their hind legs, and so they change the way that their back is to adjust for the asymmetry in their movement. And hock soreness and stifle soreness can kind of cause secondary lumbosacral pain due to the muscle attachments in that area and the way that they change their posture. So yeah, there's a lot of other components that can cause secondary back pain due to the fact that they just can't move normally, they can't bear weight normally, and they don't travel symmetrically.
And when do you call the vet?
Ooh. So it depends on the person. There's some people that they call the vet, you know, as soon as they notice something. Other people will wait for more obvious signs. I think a good relationship with a veterinarian is essential. Someone who is a team player and partner with your horse, that knows your, you know, they know your goals, they know your horse, they know what's normal. If something changes, you know, I think if you were wondering if you need to go to the vet or not, a behavior change is what would kind of tip me off. If my horse has been doing one thing forever and now suddenly he tries to bite me when I tighten my girth, well, you know, maybe something's wrong. Or if my horse is, you know, starting to buck under saddle, or if my horse is just all of a sudden, I'm just not, you know, the level of competition has decreased and my horse is just not performing as well as it used to. All of those things. You know, I'm personally, being a veterinarian, I like to go, before I was a vet, I would like to go to the vet first and rule out those things. Other people like to kind of try it and figure things out themselves. And I know money is also a factor. So I can understand, you know, some people trying to figure it out with, you know, friends and confidants, that sort of thing. But to me, the sooner is better than the later, because you know, if back pain and back issues continue to go undiagnosed, you're going to have muscle atrophy, you're going to have muscle weakness, you're going to have changes in the back that are going to take months to rebuild. And, you know, then you look at the behavior component of riding and competing on a horse that's in pain. The longer that they do it, the harder it is to change that behavior. Once they, you know, they've done studies that show that horses associate places and areas with negative experiences. So if the horse knows that whenever they're asked to be ridden or they're asked to go to the show, that it's going to be painful, you know, they actually retain those memories. So for me to try and break that pain cycle and break that negativity, the sooner rather than later is what I would do.
And Krista, how about, what is the process? Like, so if you have a back issue, is it the vet first, the saddle, or do you buy it? Like, what would you do?
So I always have the people who have trainers work with their trainer. The trainer works with the vet and the chiropractor together. Usually, honestly, they usually all work together. I always have them look at the problem first. If their saddles, mostly when I go out, if the saddle, you can tell the horse, it fits the horse, but the horse is going really cranky. They work with their vet and their chiropractor first. And that's what I recommend, because there might be some underlying issues that you just don't see.
Michelle, what causes dry spots? Is it the lack of airflow?
Well, some people believe it's bridging, so where the saddle isn't sitting level on the horse. So there's a lot of different theories with dry spots. It should be dry along the spine because your saddle shouldn't be sitting on the spine. So there's airflow going there, so it's dry. But man, I've read so many different things on sweat patterns with horses, and it's kind of all over the place. I think, like Krista was saying, if your horse is comfortable, it's not having any signs of sore back or issues, not to get too concerned about dry spots.
And Krista, how does the girth shape affect the horse's back in dressage specifically? But I think
I was just reading that question, and I don't work with a lot of dressage saddles. I know a lot of people like the anatomical girths because it just gives them a little bit more room when the movement of the way it curves in. But I'm going to be honest, I don't do a lot of dressage saddles. So I really can't answer that question.
I don't know either. So, okay, I think we answered most. We did the blankets. Someone asked for a treeless saddle. Do you have opinions on that?
Yeah, so
Lauren.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I'm a barrel racer, so my first thought was, treeless saddles are so popular in barrel horses.
They are. Yeah.
So is that question directed to me?
Yeah, it could be. You could.
Sorry. I'll just throw my 2 cents in real quick. First of all, are there English treeless saddles?
No.
Okay.
Well, no, not with Butte. No.
Okay.
No, I don't think I've never seen one.
Yeah.
Okay.
I've never seen one. Yeah.
So treeless saddles are pretty popular, mostly as barrel saddles, specifically, not even with other Western disciplines. And the way that people like the treeless saddles, it kind of hugs you a little bit more. The cantle and pommel are higher, and it's soft. Whenever you put your weight in the stirrups, like you can actually kind of feel it come in like this. Some people love them. The pros to them are that, there's not a firm tree. So if you do have a weird shaped back, it will kind of conform. The negative with the treeless saddles, in my opinion, are the fact that, so the tree is designed to distribute the weight of the rider over the horse's back. And when you don't have that tree, the weight is concentrated kind of in a focal point. So for a horse that might have a back injury, or even a normal horse, if they have that weight that's constantly hitting in one spot, I think it might make them sore. It's kind of a tricky, you kind of have to look at what the horse likes, what you like, and what's happy. I personally ride in a treed saddle because I like the feeling of having a hard seat, and I like knowing that my weight is distributed.
Yeah, Krista, do you want to say something on the treeless ones?
No, I was just listening to her. It's very interesting. I didn't know anything about treeless saddles, so it's very interesting.
I get a lot of, I can put a couple of remarks in there. I get a lot of people contacting me. I have a treeless saddle, and it's, I guess I have a tendency, I've never rode in one, but like Dr. Davang, I see a lot of people here, and especially barrel racing, riding in them. The most common complaint is that they slip or roll quite a bit. I guess because it doesn't have the hard tree. So I get a lot of people that want to try out the Western Secure Pad to stop that slipping and rolling. So it seems quite popular, and it helps. I think that amount of movement on a horse's back would make me a little more nervous, because any movement is going to create friction and possibly some muscle soreness. So and then I saw someone commented that they said there are brands of English treeless saddles, but I've never seen one. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, and saddles, like there's innovation in everything. So I'm sure in 5 years there's going to be different things, and the goal is really to make the horse more comfortable, the rider perform better. And so what we have today is not necessarily what will be in the market. And that's the thing. When we started at Ecogold, like there wasn't a ton of innovation. We started 30 years ago with these high-tech materials, and it was kind of new in the market. But I think that we'll see other innovations on the saddle side as well. So Krista, how about just tips to maintain a healthy back? I don't think you answered that question.
Tips, like it kind of goes back to just checking your saddle, making sure your saddle fits, and sorry, my dog got it.
Is that your dog?
Yeah, sorry, he escaped. I don't know how, and looking at me. It's just going back to always checking the fit of your saddle. If you have any problems, like I said before, you guys should always contact your vet and your chiropractor to look at any issues you have.
If a horse has a longer back, is there anything that a rider should focus on to strengthen the back and carry more weight on the hind? Can someone answer that?
I have a client that their horse has quite a long back, and she kind of has a little bit of persistent chronic lumbar stiffness. If it gets worse, she gets it checked out. If it doesn't, but I think it's kind of, I always refer them back to just being like people, like, someone with a longer back has to protect it a little bit more, and they seem to get a little bit more sore in their lumbar area. Just having a really strong core again to support that back, I think is important. And with any horse, I don't think I mentioned it, but it was one of the things on my notes that having an appropriate warm up and cool down when you're riding too is huge, because a lot of people just get on. I see it all the time. They jump on and off they go, and you really need to give time for the muscles, not only the muscles, but the ligaments and tendons to warm up before you really start working your horse, and then give that horse time to cool back down and before you come to a stop. So
wonderful. Okay, I think we answered all the questions in the different chats and the Q&A, and I think that it's hard to have everything in an hour, but we try to get as much content, as much information, and the point is continue your education. There's tons of articles out there. And hopefully there's other opportunities to learn, videos on YouTube and whatnot. And the more science, real science. Lauren, do you have advice in terms of the type of information people should seek out?
Yeah, I don't expect everybody to have to go look at, peer-reviewed journal articles. They can be a little tedious to read, and they can be a little not the most fun for reading. But I do think that whenever you're looking at research, the best thing is to find something that's as little bias as possible. So, when I'm doing a Google search for something, I like to look at articles that are based on, journal articles. The Horse, I think, is a really good website for the person, who's not a veterinarian. They have really good recaps of articles that were published by veterinarians. They have a lot of good science behind them. So I like that a lot. I tend to shy away from like the forum type answers or testimonials, because whenever you get a random, forum type situation, there's no governing on who's saying what, or if what they're saying is true, or that might just be their one experience, their one anecdote. I think those are kind of the least likely to go to. So I think as far as like looking for stuff, I like to look for articles that are, based in science, that have sound information behind them.
Mm-hmm. That's wonderful. All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone. This was great. Everyone seemed to enjoy it. I hope you learned a little bit, and now you can check your horse's back and see if he's sore based on all the advice we got today. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.